Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at a different independent computer role-playing game. This week I'm taking a look back at a really old game from a company that regularly puts out similarly structured RPGs with a focus on story over presentation, Geneforge. It's first in the Geneforge series, of course. Developed and published by Spiderweb Software, it was released way back in 2001. So why am I taking a look at a game that is nearly 20 years old? Well, first of all, I've wanted to cover some Spiderweb Software games for quite some time now, and I figured I may as well start with one of their classics. Secondly, at least as of this recording, they recently finished funding a Kickstarter for a remake of the game, so I wanted to actually take a look at the original before that came out. Spiderweb Software is a small company that has for decades now produced pretty solid little turn-based role-playing games that focus on storyline and systems and world building over graphics. Even their newer titles look like something from years gone by. I've oddly enough had a lot of their games in my various libraries for years, but never actually spent a lot of time playing them, so this was actually a first for me. Geneforge itself is the first of a 5-part series, as I mentioned, revolving around turn-based combat in an isometric world. In terms of plot, you are a Shaper, or one of a few subclasses thereof, a member of a group of spellcasters that can shape new forms of life out of the nutrients in their own essence. When traveling out into the world, you are attacked by a mysterious ship and stranded upon a barred island. That is an island that has suffered some event in the past that forced its evacuation and pretty much keeps anybody from visiting it. With just your wits and starting abilities, you must find some way to survive the various factions and dangers of the island, explore its ruins, and eventually find a way off of it. When you start the game, you are given a character creation screen, which you can select from 3 classes: the Shaper, or the primary caster, the Guardian, or the melee class, the Agent, a rogue-type class. All 3 classes actually have access to the same skills, but are just more efficient at using certain of those skills within their purview. You do get a certain number of points to distribute amongst the various ability scores and skills when you start. Each character has 4 basic ability scores: strength, dexterity, intelligence, and endurance, and they impact about what you'd expect if you've played any role-playing games whatsoever. There are also 4 skill categories, 3 of which have 4 skills and 1 of which has 3 skills. Combat skills include melee weapons, missile weapons, quick action that allows your actions to go faster in combat, and anatomy that increases the critical chance with melee weapons. Magic skills effectively give bonuses to using certain types of magic: battle magic, mental magic, and blessing magic, with spellcraft increasing the effectiveness of all spells. Shaping skills allow you to craft and improve the effectiveness of various types of creatures: fire shaping with fire-themed creatures, battle shaping with physical creatures, and magic shaping for spellcasting creatures, with healing craft simply being a skill focused on healing spells. Finally, there is general skills of leadership, mechanics, and luck, which are more based on interaction with the world. For instance, mechanic is your basic lockpicking and trap-solving kind of thing. Once you've assigned your character's points, you are drawn directly into the intro. Most cutscenes in this game consist of simple text boxes with illustrations in a very old-school, almost pen-and-paper style. After your introduction to the game and your arrival on the island, you're dropped into the tutorial area of the island. The screen is divided into several subsections. The main view shows an isometric tile-based world and allows you to move around by selecting your characters and clicking on an area. You can also scroll the screen around to see more of the particular map you're on. Each map is covered with a fog of war that is peeled back as you move around, and the maps are connected to one another by shaded loading zones. There are occasional items you can interact with, jars you can open, drawers you can search, and so on, and that can all be done through the main screen. Below the main screen is a text box where messages are displayed, although other messages are occasionally displayed over the actual map screen during the play, ranging from simple notifications in the background to full-on text-based dialogue boxes. Below the message box is a list of quick selection keys where various skills and utility buttons are displayed. To the right of that are 4 buttons, 1 to toggle combat mode, 1 to access the instructions of the game, 1 to adjust the formation of your characters, and then a menu button to allow for saving and loading the game. On the right-hand side of the screen, your characters and creations are displayed in the upper right, which is basically your party screen, under which is your character's inventory screen. This shows what the character has equipped as well as what they have in inventory, and offers 2 links that will open up the character's abilities and statistics and will allow you to level up when your character has attained a certain amount of experience. Finally, in the lower right-hand side of the screen is a mini-map of the area. Within the statistics screen, one can see all of the skills previously mentioned, but your main character has a few other attributes. Their name, for one, but also their level, available skill points, experience, and experience required for the next level, health, essence, which is required for shaping creatures and casting a few spells, spell energy, which is used for most other spells, coins, carrying capacity, and encumbrance, and then the character's resistances, armor, resistance to stun, mind attacks, poison, and acid. In the ability screen, one can see the character's ratings with very specific spells. These are found during play, and there's actually only a couple of spells per overall skill, so there aren't that many to deal with, at least in this first entry. Most of the spells involve creating creations, which is one of the major elements of the game. These are effectively your other party members, and you may create them whole cloth or reclaim them at any time. Creating a creature requires essence based on the abilities that you give to it, and you can choose whether to create one very powerful minion or many relatively weaker ones and customize their ability scores. Essence used in this way is not available for spellcasting until the creature has been reclaimed, although essence used for general spellcasting, for instance healing spells, will become available when the character rests or replenishes at certain ruins. Likewise, hit points only return in town or in certain places and ruins that you discover, unless of course you use a healing spell or healing pot, while spell points regenerate over time to allow for use of minor spells almost continuously. Characters can equip items into various slots on their paper doll and may wield a variety of weapons and tools. Many of these are pretty basic, swords and daggers and the like, various pieces of armor, but there are a few strange weapons and tools that are effectively creatures in and of themselves. The thorn rod, for instance, is a ranged weapon that is actually a living creature that fires thorns, while the living tool is essentially your lockpick / repair kit / all-in-one tool, a single-use living creature that can be used on doors or chests or other mechanisms in lieu of the mechanics skill. There is a variety of other usable items as well, such as healing pods and food, and you can either find those in the world or trade them from various NPCs. Although exploration is in real time, combat is in turn-based, and whenever you come into a view of a hostile enemy, it automatically kicks over. Combat rounds happen in order of characters' initiative, based on their dexterity and quick action, and characters get a certain number of action points each turn. This allows them to move or perform an attack. Most attacks take 5 action points, although some may be more or less, and once a character has attacked, their turn ends. So while you can move and then attack, there is no attack and then move. If you have an exceptionally high quick action score, you may even be able to manage multiple attacks per round, or at least multiple rounds, before the enemy has a chance. Combat is simplistic after these basics. Simply reduce your enemy's hit points to 0 before they do that to you. If your main character dies, it's game over and you have to restart from your last save, although you can lose your creations pretty much any time. Defeating enemies grants experience, which eventually allows you to level up, and when you level up, you do get a certain number of points to distribute amongst your various abilities and skills. While you automatically enter the turn-based mode when combat is initiated, it doesn't automatically turn off. The ability to turn the turn-based mode on and off can be useful in other situations as well, I'm sure, later in the game. As far as interaction with NPCs, this is where Geneforge really excels, even though the interface is basically just a dialogue box. There is a lot of text in this game, as seems to be common with Spiderweb Software's titles, and the storyline presents multiple factions of beings with multiple quests that can be approached in a variety of ways. This makes for a surprisingly interesting bit of role-playing in an otherwise simple game, since it allows you to present your character however you may wish. In terms of graphics, Geneforge is, well, I'll be kind and say basic. The interface is thick and clunky, the tile-based world resembles something out of several years before even when it was released, and the resolution is tiny, although it will offer to set your system resolution to an appropriate retro size given the opportunity. The sound effects are likewise very primitive, and the overall interface experience just feels lumbering, although it's not particularly difficult, it just feels kind of slow and clunky. With that having been said, I honestly don't think it's as bad as all that. You may hear about Spiderweb Software titles being terrible in terms of their interface and graphics. I honestly have played other RPGs of the time, and even slightly earlier in that era, where the graphics were much, much worse. Although clunky, the interface is not terrible, and given the overall simplicity of the game itself, it doesn't really detract from it too much. One might say that the graphics haven't aged as bad as, say, 3D graphics of the era, which sometimes look absolutely atrocious, but that's mostly because they weren't all that impressive to begin with, although that can be a plus for some people. Geneforge is a classic title in the Spiderweb Software library and is just the start of a pretty epic series. It departs from fantasy to present an almost biotechnological science fantasy setting in its way, and I can appreciate that departure. It makes for a very unique feel of play. The old school aesthetic isn't going to appeal to everyone, I will admit, but the storytelling and storyline in general is very solid, and the NPCs are well realized, at least when they're not the generic NPCs. The world itself rewards exploration, although it was pretty linear initially. I have to say that it reminds me vaguely of this Fallout series in terms of graphical presentation and complexity, although a little bit simplified. How you enjoy the game is really going to rely heavily on your tolerance for the presentation, which, although utilitarian, isn't exactly the prettiest of things. It is currently available on GOG and Steam as a package with all 5 entries included, and can be often found on sale at that. I'm interested in seeing how the remake goes, although from what I understand, what I've seen in the past, even the improved graphics offered by a few Spiderweb Software remakes haven't exactly upgraded them to stellar levels, merely bringing them up to what you might say is the minimum passable level during each iteration. And I can understand that can be a bit of a disappointment to some who are expecting a lot of upgrades. Spiderweb Software does have a number of similar series out, the Avernum series and its remake, the Avedon series, and a few standalone games, such as Nethergate. And I'm actually thinking I'm probably going to check out another one of these soon, maybe not next week, but pretty soon. I'll probably start with the Avedon series. I certainly enjoyed Geneforge more than I thought I would, especially for how aged the game is, however. And I think I'm going to wrap it up at that. As always, I'll put a link to the description below where you can pick this one up. This has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday, Geneforge. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you're still watching this far, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who have supported this channel via Patreon or direct donations throughout the years, without which this channel could not have lasted as long as it has. For those who are feeling particularly generous, you can still support my work through Patreon and now through Subscribestar as well, through the links in the description below.